The market district of Vexor Station buzzed with activity like it did every standard cycle. Merchants from 100 different worlds called out their wares in a dozen languages. The air smelled of exotic spices, ozone from energy weapons on display, and the metallic tang that came from mixing so many different atmospheres. In one pressurized space, Captain Hyun Soo walked through the crowd with his daughter, Dayun's small hand tucked safely in his own. She was 9 years old, dark-haired, and curious about everything around her. This was her first time off Earth, her first time seeing aliens that weren't on a video screen. Her eyes were wide with wonder as she watched a floating jellyfish-like creature drift past, its translator device chirping in musical tones. "Papa, look at that one," Dayun whispered, pointing at a merchant with crystal skin that refracted light into rainbow patterns. The Korath noticed her staring and waved a faceted hand in greeting. Dayun waved back, delighted. Hyun Soo smiled. His daughter's joy made the long journey from Earth worth every uncomfortable moment in cryosleep. He was here as part of Earth's new diplomatic corps, sent to learn coalition protocols and establish trade relationships. Humanity had only joined the Galactic Coalition 8 months ago, after a survey ship stumbled across Earth and nearly crashed trying to escape what they logged as a Class 12 Deathworld. The term still amused Hyun Soo. Yes, Earth had hurricanes and earthquakes and animals that could kill you in creative ways. But to humans, it was just home. The galaxy, however, saw Earth differently. Most coalition species came from gentle worlds with light gravity and few predators. They looked at humans and saw something that shouldn't exist: persistence hunters with binocular predator vision, impossible endurance, and a casual tolerance for D-forces that would kill most aliens. But none of that mattered right now. Right now, Hyun Soo was just a father showing his daughter the galaxy. They stopped at a food stall where a friendly insectoid, Vrel, was serving something that looked like glowing noodles. Dayun giggled as the merchant's translator struggled to explain what was in the dish. Hyun Soo bought a small portion, and they shared it while watching the crowd flow past. That's when it happened. Dayun, distracted by a group of floating cargo drones overhead, took a step backward. She bumped into something. The impact was gentle, barely enough to make the figure stumble. Hyun Soo turned and felt his stomach tighten. His daughter had bumped into a Draxel officer. The reptilian stood nearly 7 feet tall, covered in dark green scales with a crest of bone ridges along his skull. His uniform marked him as a commander in the Coalition Security Forces. His black eyes, vertical pupils narrowed to slits, glared down at Dayun with unmistakable contempt. "Clumsy Deathworlder spawn," the Draxel hissed. His translator rendered the words in perfect English, but the venom needed no translation. "I'm sorry, sir," Dayun said quickly, her voice small. She'd been taught to be polite to everyone on the station. "I didn't see you." Hyun Soo moved forward, already pulling his daughter back. "It was an accident, Commander." "We apologize." The Draxel's name badge read Threx. He looked at Hyun Soo with the same contempt he'd shown Dayun. "You humans think you can join the coalition and ignore proper respect. You let your offspring run wild like animals?" Other shoppers were stopping now, sensing conflict. A Korath merchant dimmed their light in what Hyun Soo recognized as their species' version of anxiety. 2 human technicians working on a nearby power conduit had gone very still, their attention locked on the scene. "Again, we apologize," Hyun Soo said, keeping his voice level. His hand tightened protectively on Dayun's shoulder. "No disrespect was intended. We'll be more careful." He tried to turn away, to defuse the situation, but Threx's clawed hand shot out and grabbed his arm. The grip was strong enough to hurt. "I'm not finished, human," Threx snarled. "Your kind needs to learn your place in civilized society. You don't walk away from a superior officer." Hyen Su's eyes went cold. His free hand moved Dune behind him. "Remove your hand, Commander." "Or what?" Threx's lipless mouth curved into what might have been a smile. "You'll show me how savage your species really is. I've read your files. Earth, a world of violence and death. And you expect us to treat you as equals?" The two human technicians had put down their tools. They weren't approaching, but they were no longer pretending to work. Their body language had changed in a subtle way that made several nearby aliens uncomfortable without understanding why Hyen Su kept his voice calm. But something in his tone made Threx's pupils dilate slightly. "This is your last warning. Remove your hand from me and apologize to my daughter. Then we can all go about our day." Threx laughed, a harsh barking sound. "Apologize? To that?" He gestured dismissively at Dayun, who was peeking out from behind her father, tears beginning to well in her eyes. What happened next took less than a second. Threx's other hand came around in a casual, backhand strike aimed at Dayun. Perhaps he meant to frighten her. Perhaps he intended to discipline her the way Draxel adults discipline their young. It didn't matter. His scaled fist connected with the 9-year-old girl's face with a crack that echoed through the marketplace. Dayun flew backward from the force of the blow. She hit the ground hard enough to crack the metal flooring plates, her small body rolling twice before coming to rest against a vendor's stall. She didn't get up. Blood trickled from her nose and split. Lip. The marketplace went absolutely silent. Hyen Su stood frozen for one heartbeat, two, then. He moved with the deliberate precision of a man controlling himself. Through sheer force of will, he walked past Threx, who was examining his own hand as if surprised by what he'd just done. He walked to his daughter and knelt beside her. "Dayun," he said softly, "can you hear me?" She whimpered, and the sound of it did something to every human within hearing range. The two technicians were now standing. 3 human merchants had emerged from their stalls. A human security officer appeared from a side corridor, hand near her weapon. Hyen Su carefully picked up his daughter, cradling her against his chest. Her face was already swelling, the bruise blooming purple-black across her cheek. He stood and turned to look at Threx. He said nothing. No threats, no promises, no curses. He just looked at the Draxil commander with eyes that had tracked prey across African plains for 1,000,000 years. Eyes that calculated, measured, and remembered. Threx suddenly found he couldn't hold that gaze. For all his pride, for all his species' military dominance, something in the human stare triggered instincts older than civilization. Prey instincts. Hyen Su carried his daughter toward the medical bay. As he walked, every human he passed fell into step behind him, not following exactly, but moving with purpose in the same direction. Within minutes, the human population of Vexor Station knew what had happened. The communications network lit up with quiet, encrypted messages. In the marketplace, Threx stood alone. Vendors had closed their stalls. The crowd had dispersed. Coalition security arrived to take his statement, and he filed his report with the arrogance of someone certain the law was on his side. He was right about the law. But as a Koroth elder watched from a balcony above, he thought about his species' studies of human history and warfare. The humans were talking now, quietly coordinating across their entire scattered diaspora. And everyone who knew anything about Deathworlders understood. When humans went quiet after being wronged, that's when you should be most afraid. 3 days passed after the incident in the marketplace. On the surface, everything on Vexor Station continued as normal. Ships docked and departed on schedule. Trade negotiations proceeded. The various species that called the station home went about their daily routines. But something had changed. Dr. Sua worked in the medical wing where Dayun had been treated. The girl's injuries were healing well, thankfully. Humans were resilient, their bodies designed by evolution to take punishment and keep functioning. But the bruising on Dao-Yun's face remained visible, a dark purple mark that drew the eye of everyone who saw her. Su Dash had done something unusual after treating the child. She'd requested access to the station's medical database, specifically the sections dealing with Draxel physiology. When asked why, she explained she wanted to better understand the species in case future medical exchanges were needed between humans and Draxel. The request was approved. Su spent hours studying Draxel anatomy. She learned about their redundant organ systems. She learned about the weak points in their scaled armor. She learned exactly where their major nerve clusters were located and what kind of pressure would be needed to damage them. She took careful notes. Other humans on the station were equally busy. Lieutenant Wu Jin worked in the communications center as part of the human delegation's technical staff. He was good at his job, maybe too good. In the 3 days since Dae-Yun was struck, he'd sent 73 messages to various human ships and installations throughout Coalition space. All were properly encrypted using approved protocols. All passed through Coalition monitoring systems without triggering any alerts. Coalition intelligence did notice the volume of traffic and ran a random check. The messages they intercepted contained nothing suspicious. Discussions about supply schedules, requests for technical manuals, questions about upcoming shore leave policies. Boring administrative work. What they didn't know was that Wu Jin was using a code within the code. Hidden in timestamps, message lengths, and routing information was another conversation entirely. He was coordinating something, but the Coalition's automated systems couldn't see it. Engineer Ji-Ho had become suddenly very interested in how Vexor Station's infrastructure worked. He asked questions about power distribution, life support redundancies, and security protocols. He framed his inquiries as professional curiosity, a human engineer wanting to understand Coalition technology. The Vrel maintenance supervisor was happy to answer. Humans were new to the Coalition, and sharing knowledge helped build relationships. Ji-Ho learned about the station's 17 primary power nodes. He learned about the backup systems and emergency protocols. He learned about the 42 critical junction points that kept everything running smoothly. He also learned that most of these systems could be accessed through maintenance panels that required only standard engineering clearance. He memorized the locations of each one. Xenobiologist Yuna approached the situation from a different angle. She worked in the science wing studying comparative biology across Coalition species. Now she'd submitted research proposals specifically focused on Draxel behavior patterns and stress responses. She wanted to understand what made them aggressive, what frightened them, what psychological pressures they found most difficult to endure. Her research proposals were approved. She interviewed several Draxel crew members, running them through psychological assessment tests under the guise of cross-species understanding. She learned fascinating things about how their minds worked, about their hierarchies and their fears. She shared none of her findings with her Draxel subjects, but she did share them with other humans on the station. Captain Hyan-Su spent most of his time with Dae-Yun in their quarters. The girl was physically recovering, but she'd grown quiet. She flinched when she heard loud noises. She asked her father if she'd done something wrong to make the alien so angry. "No, sweetheart," Hyan-Su told her, holding her gently. "You did nothing wrong." "Nothing at all. Then why did he hit me?" Hyan-Su didn't have a good answer for that. He just held his daughter and let her cry. Later, when she finally fell asleep, he sat in the dark and sent a single message to his brother back on Earth. It contained 2 sentences. "They hurt Dae-Yun. We're handling it." The message reached Earth and spread through human networks like wildfire. Hyan-Su's brother was a cargo ship captain. He knew people. Those people knew other people. Within hours, dozens of human vessels throughout the sector began making course adjustments. By the fourth day, the first of these ships arrived at Vexor Station. The freighter Indomitable requested docking clearance for routine maintenance. The station controller approved without question. The Indomitable was known in the sector, a converted warship from Earth's old corporate conflicts, now hauling legitimate cargo. Its captain was a man named Tae Yang. He'd served with Hyansu years ago on Earth. When he heard what happened to Dayun, he'd altered his ship's course without hesitation. He brought his crew of 47 humans, all of them former military, all of them understanding exactly why they were here without needing to be told. They didn't storm off the ship making threats. They docked peacefully, submitted their manifests, and dispersed into the station like any other crew on shore leave. Some went to bars. Some went shopping. Some just walked around, getting familiar with the station's layout. The next day, 2 more human ships arrived. A mining vessel captained by a woman named Haewon, and a small transport running supplies to outer colonies. Both had legitimate reasons to be at Vexor Station. Both carried crews who'd heard about a human child being struck by an alien officer. Coalition security noted the increase in human traffic, but saw no cause for concern. Vexor was a major hub. Ships came and went constantly. The humans were all properly documented and following station regulations. What security didn't notice was how the humans were moving once aboard. They weren't staying in designated guest areas. They were mapping the station, memorizing layouts, identifying critical systems. They moved through the corridors like water finding cracks, polite and unobtrusive, but everywhere. On the 5th day, someone in Coalition intelligence finally ran a pattern analysis. A junior analyst named Crix, one of the insectoid Vrel, noticed something odd. The human ships arriving at Vexor weren't following normal commercial routes. When he plotted their original trajectories and their altered courses, he saw a pattern that made his mandibles click nervously. He'd studied Earth military history as part of his training. What he saw in the ship movements matched something called a wolf pack formation, a tactic human naval forces had used centuries ago to coordinate attacks on enemy vessels. Multiple ships, seemingly operating independently, all converging on a single point from different angles. Crix filed a report flagged as urgent. His supervisor reviewed it and dismissed the concern. Humans were new to space. They probably didn't understand efficient routing yet. Their inefficient travel was just inexperience, not coordination. But Crix couldn't shake his unease. He began monitoring human communications more closely. Everything was properly encrypted and properly logged. Nothing suspicious. Yet his instincts screamed that something was building. By day 6, 17 human ships were docked at or near Vexor Station. This represented more than half of humanity's deep space-capable vessels in the sector. The statistical probability of this happening by chance was effectively 0. The Korath ambassador was the first official to sound an alarm. His species had made extensive studies of human history, fascinated by how such violent beginnings could produce a species capable of cooperation and diplomacy. But he'd also studied human warfare. They're coordinating, he told the station commander, a heavyset being from a high-gravity world called Kronoth. This isn't random. They're preparing something. Preparing what? The commander asked, not unreasonably. The humans have filed no complaints beyond the initial incident report. They've made no demands. They're following every regulation. That's what concerns me, the Korath ambassador said, his crystalline body pulsing with anxious light. When humans are about to do something terrible, they become perfectly civilized first. It's in their history, over and over. The quiet before the storm. The commander didn't fully understand, but agreed to increase monitoring of human activities. Security began more frequent patrols near human gathering spots. They found nothing suspicious. Humans drinking in bars, humans shopping, humans working their assigned duties. Everything normal. Except Daeyoon's bruise was still visible. And every time a human saw it, something happened behind their eyes. A calculation. A confirmation. A promise. Commander Threx remained confined to secure areas under coalition protection. He'd filed his own report, claiming the child had been disrespectful and required discipline. Coalition law technically supported his position. He had immunity as a military officer, and by Dragzil standards, his response had been appropriate. The Coalition Tribunal was scheduled to review the case on day 9. Everyone expected them to rule in Threx's favor. The law was clear, even if it felt wrong to many species aboard the station. The humans waited. They said nothing. They did nothing overtly threatening. They just waited, gathered in greater and greater numbers. Like a storm building pressure behind a dam. And in the quiet spaces between their words. In the encrypted messages and knowing glances. They were finishing their preparations for what came next. The human-owned bar called the Gravity Well sat in one of Vexor Station's older sections. It was a modest establishment with stronger gravity than most of the station maintained, comfortable for humans, but exhausting for most other species. This made it naturally private. Few aliens visited except out of curiosity, and they rarely stayed long. On the 7th night after Daeyoon was struck, the bar was closed to outside customers. A sign on the door apologized for a private event. Inside, 73 humans gathered around tables, pushed together into rough conference formations. Captain Taeyang stood at the front, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He was a broad-shouldered man with scars on his knuckles and a reputation for finishing what he started. Behind him, a holographic display showed a schematic of Vexor Station with various sections highlighted in red. "Most of you know why we're here," Taeyang said, his voice carrying easily through the room. "For those who just arrived, I'll make it simple. 9 days ago, a Draxil officer struck a 9-year-old human child hard enough to crack the deck plates. The girl's name is Daeyoon. She's Captain Hyun-Soo's daughter." He gestured, and the holographic display changed to show medical scans of Daeyoon's injuries. Several people in the room made quiet, angry sounds. A woman in a mining crew jumpsuit had to look away, her jaw clenched tight. "Coalition Tribunal meets in 2 days," Taeyang continued. "They're going to rule in favor of the alien. It's already decided. Diplomatic immunity, cultural differences, all the legal bullshit. Threx gets a formal warning, maybe a small fine. Then he goes back to his life like nothing happened. And Daeyoon?" Someone called from the back. It was Hae-Won, the mining ship captain. Her crew was seated around her, all of them looking grim. Daeyoon gets to live with the memory of being hit by something 3 times her size, while the galaxy shrugs and moves on, Taeyang said flatly. "That's what happens if we do nothing." The room was silent except for the hum of the station's ventilation systems. Every person there understood what was being discussed without it being said directly. They were talking about taking action outside the law, about showing the galaxy that humans protected their own, regardless of what any tribunal decided. "What's the plan?" asked a man with engineer's calluses on his hands. This was Ji-Ho, who'd spent days mapping the station's infrastructure. Taeyang nodded to him, and Ji-Ho stood, pulling up his own set of schematics. "Vexor Station runs on 17 primary power nodes," he explained, highlighting each one on the display. "Each node has triple redundancy and backup systems. Very safe, very robust. But they all route through 42 critical junction points." He zoomed in on one of the junctions. "I've personally accessed 37 of these points over the past week. Standard maintenance clearance gets you in. The systems aren't designed to handle certain kinds of stress, especially if multiple points fail simultaneously. "You're talking about sabotage," said an older woman named Mayron. She was a retired naval officer who'd been on the station visiting family when the incident occurred. "I'm talking about engineering," Jiho corrected with a slight smile. "Theoretical engineering. Hypothetically, if someone wanted to disable the station's power without causing permanent damage or risking lives, they could introduce cascade failures at specific junction points. Power goes down. Backups go down. Emergency systems last about 6 hours before the station becomes uninhabitable. Hypothetically," someone else added, and there was grim laughter around the room. Dr. Sua spoke next. "I've been studying Draxel psychology. They're proud species, hierarchical, very concerned with status and strength. Physical pain doesn't bother them much, but psychological pressure is different. They don't handle isolation well. They especially don't handle being made to feel weak in front of others." She pulled up her own beta. If someone wanted to send a message to Commander Threx without touching him, you'd need to make him understand the impact of his actions. Make him see what he did, over and over, in a way he can't ignore or rationalize away. Xenobiologist Yuna added her piece. "I've interviewed 32 Draxel over the past week. They respond strongly to visual stimulus, especially when it involves victims of their actions. It's a trait from their predator evolution. Showing them the consequences of their behavior in detail creates psychological distress that lasts much longer than physical punishment." The pieces were coming together. Everyone in the room could see the shape of what was being proposed. It wasn't violence. It wasn't revenge in the traditional sense. It was something more calculated, more precise. "What about the other aliens on the station?" someone asked. "Innocents who'd be caught in a power failure?" Lieutenant Wu Jin addressed this concern. "I've been coordinating with every human family on board. We have 14 children here, total. They'll be evacuated along with our essential personnel 24 hours before anything happens. We'll claim routine transport schedules. The Korath ambassador has already started evacuating their citizens," Tai Yang added. "They're smart enough to see what's building. Other species will figure it out soon enough. We'll make sure there's time for anyone to leave who wants to leave." A hand went up near the back. It was a young man named Bin who worked on a cargo hauler. "What if the Coalition sends warships? What if they decide to arrest all of us?" This was the critical question. Everyone leaned forward slightly, waiting for the answer. Taeyang's expression hardened. "Then we remind them who we are. 17 human ships are currently in this sector. Not all of them are cargo haulers anymore. Some of us remember what our vessels were before we converted them for peaceful use. If the Coalition wants a fight, we'll give them one. But I don't think it'll come to that." He pulled up a different display, showing Coalition fleet positions. "The nearest military response force is 6 hours away at best speed. In 6 hours, our demonstration will be complete. We're not trying to hold territory. We're not trying to start a war. We're delivering a message. You don't hurt our children and walk away." Colonel Sung Min spoke for the first time. He was the oldest person in the room, a man who'd fought in 3 wars back on Earth before humanity reached the stars. His voice carried weight. "I've studied every human conflict worth studying," he said quietly. "The ones we won weren't because we were stronger or had better weapons. We won because we were willing to go further than our enemies expected. We were willing to endure longer, plan better, and pay prices that others wouldn't consider." He stood slowly, his old joints creaking. "The galaxy thinks we're primitive because we come from a violent world. They see our history and they judge us. But they don't understand that our history is exactly what makes us dangerous. We learned over thousands of years how to fight smart, how to turn disadvantages into strengths, how to make sure that anyone who hurts one of us regrets it. The room was absolutely silent. This alien struck a child, Sung Min continued. Our child. And the galaxy's law says that's acceptable. So we're going to show them that human law is different. We protect our young. Always. Even when it's inconvenient. Even when it's not diplomatic. Even when it means standing against the entire coalition. He sat back down, and there was a long moment of collective breath. Vote, Ta Yang said simply. We do this together or not at all. Raise your hand if you're in. Every hand in the room went up. Not a single person hesitated. Then we move in 48 hours, Taeyang said. Right after the tribunal issues their ruling. The moment they tell us the law won't protect our children, we show them what happens when Deathworlders write their own justice. The meeting dissolved into smaller planning groups. Engineers discussed access points and failure cascades. Medical personnel reviewed evacuation protocols. Communications specialists planned messaging and coordination. Everyone had a roll dot in a corner of the bar. Captain Hyun-soo sat quietly with Dae-yoon on his lap. She was playing with a small toy, oblivious to the discussions around her. The bruise on her face had faded from purple to yellow-green, but it was still visible. Tae-yang approached them. Hyun-soo, you don't have to be part of this. Your diplomatic corps. This could end your career. Hyun-soo looked up at his old friend. His eyes were tired but clear. Someone hurt my daughter. My career doesn't matter anymore. Tae-yang nodded and squeezed his shoulder. Then he moved on to coordinate with the others. Outside the bar, Coalition security walked past on routine patrol. They noted the private event sign and moved on. Just humans being social. Nothing to worry about. But if they'd listened at the door, if they'd understood what was being planned in that room, they might have raised every alarm on the station. The storm was no longer building. It was ready to break. The Coalition Tribunal convened at exactly 0900 station, time on the 9th day after the incident. 3 judges presided. A Korath elder whose crystalline body pulsed with measured light. A Chromath administrator whose thick hide and small eyes suggested evolutionary patience. And a Draxil legal expert whose very presence signaled where the verdict would fall. Captain Hyun-soo attended with Dae-yoon. The girl wore a simple dress, and her face, still showing the fading bruise, was visible to everyone in the chamber. Hyun-soo had specifically requested she be allowed to attend. He wanted the judges to see exactly who they were making decisions about. Commander Threx sat on the opposite side of the chamber, flanked by his legal representative and 2 security officers. He wore his full-dress uniform and maintained the rigid posture of military bearing. He didn't look at Dae-yoon. Not once. The proceedings were efficient and clinical. Evidence was presented. Security footage of the incident. Medical reports of Dae-yoon's injuries. Statements from witnesses. The Draxil legal expert argued that Threx had acted within his cultural norms when responding to disrespect from a juvenile. The human representative, a lawyer named Sun Woo, argued that striking a child could never be justified, regardless of cultural context. Tribunal deliberated for exactly 17 minutes. This tribunal finds that Commander Threx acted within the bounds of coalition diplomatic immunity, the Chromath judge announced in a voice like grinding stone. While the use of physical correction on non-Draxil juveniles is discouraged, it does not constitute a violation of coalition law when performed by a ranking military officer responding to perceived disrespect. Sun Woo stood immediately. The child is 9 years old. She accidentally bumped into him. This wasn't disrespect. The ruling stands. The Draxil judge cut him off. Commander Threx will receive a formal reprimand for cultural insensitivity and is required to attend a 3-hour seminar on human interaction protocols. This matter is closed. Hyun-soo closed his eyes briefly. He'd known this was coming, but hearing it still felt like a physical blow. He felt Dae-Yoon's small hand tighten in his own. "Papa?" She whispered. "Does this mean he didn't do anything wrong?" Hyeon-soo looked down at his daughter. Her dark eyes were confused, hurt in ways that had nothing to do with physical injuries. How did you explain to a 9-year-old that the galaxy's justice system had just told her that her pain didn't matter? "No, sweetheart," he said quietly. "It means their justice system is broken. But don't worry. There's another kind of justice." The tribunal adjourned. Threx stood with obvious satisfaction, nodding to his legal team. He still didn't look at Dae-Yoon. Perhaps he thought the matter was truly finished. Perhaps he believed diplomatic immunity made him untouchable. He was about to learn otherwise. Hyeon-soo led Dae-Yoon out of the chamber. Lieutenant Woo Jin was waiting in the corridor, a datapad in his hand. He didn't need to say anything. Hyeon-soo just nodded once, and Woo Jin activated his communications device. A single encrypted message went out to every human on Vexor Station. Judgment received. Justice begins. The response was immediate, but invisible to casual observers. Human families began departing the station, claiming sudden schedule changes and transport opportunities. Within 2 hours, every human child and most human civilians were heading to their ships or onto outbound transports. Coalition security noticed the movement, but attributed it to routine fluctuations. Humans were still new to station life. They probably just felt uncomfortable after the tribunal's decision. Natural, understandable, nothing alarming. By 1400 hours, only essential human personnel remained on the station. Engineers, technicians, security officers, and the diplomatic delegation. Roughly 200 humans total, down from over 400 that morning. At 1700 hours, the first human ships began departing. The Indomitable undocked, filed a flight plan, and moved to a position 3,000 kilometers from the station. Then it stopped, holding position in clear violation of traffic control protocols. Station control hailed the ship. "Indomitable, you're blocking shipping lanes. Please proceed to your filed destination." Captain Taeyang's voice came back calm and professional. "Negative. Control. We're experiencing engine difficulties. Holding position for diagnostics." 3 more human ships did the same thing over the next hour, each one positioning themselves at different points around the station. By 1800 hours, 17 human vessels formed a loose sphere surrounding Vexor Station, all of them claiming various technical difficulties. Coalition security finally escalated the situation to the station commander. The Chromath administrator stared at the tactical display showing the human ships in a clear containment formation. "Get me a communication link to the human ships," he ordered. Before the link could be established, something happened. At exactly 1827 hours, the lights went out. Not just in one section. The entire station plunged into darkness simultaneously. Emergency systems kicked in 3 seconds later, bathing everything in dim red light. But something was wrong. The main power wasn't coming back online. In the engineering section, alarms screamed as system after system reported critical failures. The chief engineer, a Vrel named Tik-Tik, frantically checked his displays. 42 junction points across the station had all failed within seconds of each other. The probability of that happening naturally was statistically impossible. "Sabotage," he chittered into his communicator. "This is deliberate. Someone's crashed our primary power grid. Can you fix it?" The station commander demanded. "Not quickly. Each junction will need to be physically accessed and rebuilt. We're talking days of work, maybe weeks." "And Commander?" "The backup systems are failing too. Same pattern. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing." The station commander felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Fear. How long do we have on emergency power? 6 hours. Maybe 7 if we shut down non-essential systems. After that, life support starts failing. The commander pulled up the tactical display again. The 17 human ships sat in perfect position around his station. Dark, silent, waiting. His communicator chimed. A message was coming through on the emergency band, broadcast to every display on the station. The commander opened it and felt his respiratory system constrict. On every screen, in every corridor, in every quarters and shop and office on Vexor Station, the same message appeared: you judged. We accept your judgment. But understand this: justice and law are not the same thing. Commander Threx struck a human child, our child, and you protected him with your laws. So now you will learn what happens when law fails to provide justice. We are Deathworlders. We do not start fights, but we end them. The message was signed simply: humanity. Then the screens changed. What appeared next made several station occupants physically ill. It was Dayun. The footage showed her face from every angle, medical scans of her injuries in precise detail. The moment of impact slowed down and annotated with force calculations and damage assessment. Her crying for her father played on loop. The bruising shown in time-lapse as it developed and spread across her small face. The images were clinical, educational, and absolutely devastating. They played everywhere, inescapable, showing exactly what Threx had done in detail that couldn't be rationalized or minimized. And in the center of the station, in an observation deck that had been quietly modified by human engineers over the past 3 days, Commander Threx found himself locked in a room surrounded by these images. They covered every wall, every surface, playing continuously. He couldn't look away. The room's environmental systems kept him conscious and aware. The doors were sealed. He was physically unharmed, but trapped with the consequences of his actions, rendered in excruciating, undeniable detail. Outside the station, Captain Taeyang sent one final message to Coalition Command: Vexor Station is dark. Life support will fail in 6 hours. We have not harmed anyone. We have not fired a single shot. But we will not restore power until our terms are met. You have 6 hours to decide if your diplomatic immunity is worth the lives of everyone on that station. The message included detailed technical specifications of what had been done and how to repair it, but repairs would take days. That the station didn't have Coalition Command exploded into activity. 3 military cruisers changed course toward Vexor Station at maximum speed. Emergency negotiation teams assembled. Analysts tried to understand how humans had managed this level of coordinated sabotage without any advance warning, but the humans had war-gamed this scenario. They'd studied coalition response times. They knew the military ships were 6 hours away at best speed. 6 hours that would arrive exactly when the station's emergency power failed. In the dark corridors of Vexor Station. Aliens who'd been so confident in their laws and their immunity now faced a simple truth. Humans had just demonstrated that laws only mattered when people chose to follow them. And when it came to protecting their children, humans would ignore every law ever written. The clock was ticking. The station was dying. And in the darkness, humanity waited for the galaxy's response. The first Coalition cruiser arrived at Vexor Station after 4 hours and 17 minutes of hard burn. Commander Vexler, a Draxil fleet officer, took one look at the tactical situation and understood he was facing something unprecedented. 17 human ships surrounded the station in a formation that was clearly military in nature, despite their civilian designations. The station itself was dark except for failing emergency systems. And when he tried to hail the human vessels, only one responded. "This is Captain Taeyang of the vessel Indomitable," came the calm voice. "Commander, I'm transmitting to you the complete technical specifications of what we've done to Vexor Station. You'll see that we've disabled power generation and backup systems through precise sabotage at 42 critical junction points. Repairs are possible, but they'll take approximately 60 hours of continuous work. Vexler felt his scales ripple with anger. You've crippled a coalition station. You've endangered thousands of lives. This is an act of war. No, Tai Yang corrected, his voice never losing its professional tone. This is a demonstration. An educational exercise, if you prefer. We haven't harmed anyone. Every person on that station is perfectly safe for the next hour and 43 minutes. After that, life support begins failing, and you'll have a crisis on your hands. You're threatening innocent civilians. We're protecting a child, Taeyang replied, and something in his voice made Vexler's combat instincts trigger warning signals. 9 days ago, a Draxel officer struck a 9-year-old human girl, hard enough to crack metal deck plating. Today, your tribunal ruled that this was acceptable under coalition law. So we're teaching you what happens when your laws fail to provide justice. We followed proper legal procedures. You protected the guilty and ignored the victim, Taeyang interrupted. Now you have 2 choices. You can negotiate with us and everyone lives. Or you can try to take us by force, and we'll see if your 3 cruisers can defeat 17 human vessels before that station's life support fails. I'll give you 30 seconds to decide which conversation you'd rather have. Vexler looked at his tactical officer, who was running combat simulations. The results weren't encouraging. The human ships were converted civilian vessels, but their positioning was perfect. Their coordination was obvious, and more importantly, the humans had already demonstrated they understood coalition systems better than anyone had suspected. Stand down your weapons, Vexler ordered his crew. Then to Taeyang. What are your demands? Not my demands. Humanity's requirements. Hold the channel open. You're about to receive a guest. 30 seconds later, a small transport shuttle departed from one of the human ships. It approached Vexler's cruiser and requested permission to dock. Inside was a single human woman carrying a diplomatic case. Her name was Ambassador Mina, and she'd been practicing law for 40 years before humanity reached the stars. When she entered the cruiser's command deck, she moved with the confidence of someone who'd negotiated treaties between nations and understood exactly how much leverage she held. Commander, she said, nodding politely to Vexler, I represent humanity in this matter. Here are our terms. She activated a holographic display from her case. 3 simple requirements appeared in text that was simultaneously translated into every coalition language. First, Commander Threx will be remanded to human custody and tried under human law for assault of a minor. The coalition's tribunal ruling will be formally reversed and stricken from record. Second, the coalition will draft and implement new protections for juveniles of all species aboard mixed stations. These protections will include specific prohibitions against physical punishment by non-guardians, regardless of diplomatic status. Third, the coalition will issue a formal apology to Dae-Yoon and her family, acknowledging that your legal system failed to protect her. Vexler stared at the terms. You're demanding we override diplomatic immunity and sovereign jurisdiction. The Draxel Empire will never agree to this. Then you'll explain to the galaxy why you chose diplomatic immunity over the lives of everyone on Vexor Station. Mina replied without emotion. You have 1 hour and 11 minutes before life support begins critical failure. I suggest you start making calls. What followed was 90 minutes of the most intense diplomatic negotiation in Coalition history. Vexler contacted Coalition High Command. They contacted the Draxel Empire. The Draxel Empire, initially outraged, found themselves in an impossible position. The humans had played this perfectly. They'd committed an act that technically qualified as terrorism, but they'd done it without causing any actual harm. Every person on the station was uncomfortable but safe. The humans had even provided detailed instructions on how to repair the damage, instructions that would take days to implement. More importantly, the humans had public opinion. News of what happened was spreading through Coalition space. The images of Dayun's injuries were being broadcast on every network. The story of a 9-year-old child struck by a military officer, then ignored by the justice system, resonated across species lines. Many Coalition species had juveniles. Many had experienced bullying by the more militaristic cultures. Seeing humans willing to risk everything to protect, one child struck a chord that politicians couldn't ignore, not the Korath ambassador. Watching from a safe distance, sent a private message to Coalition leadership. The humans are giving you a choice. Adapt your laws to protect all children, or prove that your Coalition values power over justice. Choose wisely. Humanity is watching, and they have very long memories. 53 minutes before life support failure, the Coalition transmitted its response. The Draxel Empire, under immense political pressure and facing the possibility of their military being blamed for thousands of deaths, agreed to the terms with one modification. Threx would be tried in a joint human Draxel court with judges from both species. Mina accepted after consulting with the other humans. Justice didn't require revenge. It required accountability. Within minutes, Taeyang transmitted activation codes to the station. Power began returning in stages, carefully controlled to prevent system shock. Within an hour, Vexor Station was fully operational again. The humans didn't celebrate. They'd never wanted this fight. They'd wanted Threx held accountable, and the Coalition to acknowledge that laws protecting children should transcend diplomatic status. Commander, Threx was transferred to human custody 2 days later. The trial lasted 3 weeks and was broadcast across Coalition space. The evidence was overwhelming. The verdict was unanimous. Guilty of assault. His sentence was unusual. Instead of imprisonment, Threx was required to serve 3 years working in a human children's hospital on Earth. He would work under supervision, helping care for sick and injured children. He would learn day after day the fragility and value of the young lives he'd so casually harmed. It was a sentence designed not for punishment, but for education. The humans wanted Threx to understand what he'd done, to see children not as inferior beings, but as precious and vulnerable members of society deserving protection. The Draxel Empire protested, but ultimately accepted. Threx served his sentence. According to later reports, by the end of his first year, he'd undergone a profound change in perspective. He requested an extension of his service and eventually became an advocate for juvenile protection laws across Coalition space. The new protections for juveniles were ratified 4 months after the incident. They were known informally as Dayun's laws, though officially they were titled the Coalition Juvenile Protection Protocols. They established clear standards for the treatment of minors across species, prohibited physical punishment by non-guardians regardless of status, and created enforcement mechanisms to ensure compliance. Dayun herself recovered fully. The physical bruises healed within weeks. The psychological impact took longer, requiring counseling and support. But she grew up knowing that when she was hurt, her entire species had mobilized to protect her. She grew up understanding that being human meant being part of something larger, community that would cross star systems to defend its children. She also grew up with an unusual pen pal, Threx. After his first year at the hospital, he'd written her a letter. It was clumsy and awkward, clearly difficult for him to compose. He apologized for hurting her. He explained that he'd been wrong, that he hadn't understood how precious children were until he worked with them daily. Dayun, with her father's guidance, wrote back. Their correspondence continued for years. She asked him about Draxel culture. He asked about human resilience. They built an unlikely bridge between species, one letter at a time, years later. When Dayun was grown and working as a child psychologist aboard a coalition station, she would sometimes tell her story to young patients. She'd explain how one terrible moment had changed the entire galaxy's approach to protecting children. "My dad told me something important after it happened," she'd say. "He said that when humans love something, we'll defend it against anything. We're not the strongest species. We're not the smartest. But we're the ones who'll turn the galaxy upside down to protect our own. That's what being human means." Captain Hyeon-soo eventually retired from diplomatic service. He'd become famous after the Vexor incident, the father who'd stayed calm, who'd trusted his species to deliver justice when the law failed. But he never sought the attention. He kept a copy of the transmission from Taeyang on his desk. "We are Deathworlders. We do not start fights, but we end them." It sat next to a photo of Daeun smiling, her bruises healed, her face bright with the resilience that humans had evolved over millions of years on a world that tried constantly to kill them. The galaxy had learned something important at Vexor Station. They'd learned that humans could be dangerous, yes, but more importantly, they'd learned that humans were dangerous in defense of the vulnerable. That when humans said they protected their children, it wasn't rhetoric or cultural posturing. It was a promise written in the hard wiring of their species. A promise that had evolved on a death world, where the ones who survived were the ones who protected their young against anything and everything. Coalition never forgot the lesson. And in the decades that followed, no one ever struck a human child again. Because everyone remembered what happened the last time someone did. They remembered 17 human ships surrounding a station. They remembered the darkness. They remembered the calm, professional voices explaining that justice wasn't negotiable. And they remembered that when you hurt a human's child, you didn't just face that human. You faced all of them, coordinated and committed and absolutely unwilling to back down. That was the Deathworlder response. Not violence for its own sake, but the promise that those who harmed the innocent would face consequences, no matter what any law or tribunal declared. It was a promise humanity had carried from Earth to the stars, and the galaxy had learned, finally, to respect it.